Hi, I'm Freddy from NUGEN Audio, and today I'm talking about the Focus Bundle. These are 3 plugins for stereo manipulation, which can also be purchased individually, but today I'm going to be talking about the full bundle. The 3 plugins are Stereoplacer, Stereoizer, and Monofilter. Stereoplacer is a frequency-specific panning tool. So what this allows you to do is, if you have some stereo audio, it allows you to pan specific frequency bands rather than panning the entire piece of audio that you're working on. So in this project, I've actually used Stereoplacer on a drum machine. So I only had a stereo mixdown of the drum machine. I wasn't entirely happy with where the hi-hat was within that stereo field. So I've zoned in on the frequency where that hi-hat is focused. And I've also enabled the harmonics function here at the bottom, which picks up overtones as well. So I'm going to bypass Stereoplacer to begin with, and then I'm going to switch it on and off so you can hear exactly what I'm doing. So you can hear there that the hi-hat is moving across the stereo field without affecting the rest of the mix. So this is really useful, for example, in a situation like this where I've only got a stereo mix down. It's also great if, for example, you've got a mono recording of an instrument like a piano and you want to create a stereo effect. You can do that by taking some of the low frequencies and moving those to one side, the high frequencies and moving them to the other side to give the kind of impression of a stereo piano recording with the low notes at one side and the high notes at the other side. So that's Stereoplacer. Next is Stereoizer. Stereoizer is a stereo width plugin, but it's a little bit different from most stereo width plugins because it can also be used to take mono audio and create a pseudo-stereo mix. That's because rather than just using linear width, it also uses IID, which you can see here on the left, and ITD on the right. That stands for interaural intensity difference and interaural time difference. Those are both essentially based on how the human ear perceives width. Interaural intensity difference creates artificial differences in intensity between the left and right, and interaural time difference creates artificial delay. But the way that those are introduced essentially means that you don't get frequency crossover, which means that if you play this out in mono, you don't get phase cancellation, so it's still mono compatible, which is really useful if your tune is likely to be played on the radio, if it's likely to be played in a nightclub, and so on and so forth. So in this project, I've used Stereoizer on a synth track. Again, I'm going to play that bypassed first, and then you can hear how Stereoizer sounds. And then I'll go through and show you how I've got Stereoizer set, and then a few other different settings so you can hear its capabilities. It's relatively subtle. You will just hear the synth opening up into the stereo field somewhat, and this is a really good way of creating space in a mix without using things like reverb to set something back. Okay, so bypassed, here we go. And now with Stereoizer. And finally, I'm just going to mess around with some of the settings so you can hear how Stereoizer is affecting the sound of that synth. So that's Stereoizer. Finally, I'm just going to talk about Monofilter. Monofilter is a bass management tool which is designed to focus the low end in your project. This can be really useful, again, if you're working on music for the club, because you don't want there to be a wide low frequency. If the PA system in a nightclub is running in stereo and you've got low frequencies which are different in each channel, then you're going to get like a wobbling effect, which is going to be quite distracting for people trying to have a dance and have a drink. As well as that, it's really useful if you're mastering for vinyl, because wide bass frequencies can cause the needle to skip. So essentially you have 3 frequency nodes within Monofilter. You have a high pass cutoff, you have a low frequency node, and a high frequency node. By default, everything above the high frequency node is in full stereo, everything below the low frequency node is in mono, and everything in between is kind of gradually opening up. So I can set that high frequency node wherever I want, I can set the low frequency node wherever I want. I could even, if I really wanted to, I could set the bass to be in stereo and the highs to be in mono, although I think there's limited situations where you'd want to do that. So again, let's hear Monofilter bypassed first of all. Now I'm going to play that again, but with Monofilter off to start with, then I'm going to switch it on, and then I'm going to start messing around with some of the settings so that you can hear how it affects the signal and how it makes the kick drum cut through a little bit more and just tidies up the bottom end of the mix. If you find that once you apply Monofilter that the track is lacking bottom end, then you do have some trim controls on the left hand side. So I find that adding a dB or so on the trim mono option tends to compensate for any bottom end that's missing, while still having the extra focus that Monofilter gives you. If you have any questions about any of these products, then please feel free to contact your Sweetwater sales engineer.